My name is Nora Campbell. I'm 34 years old and I'm an ER nurse in Dayton, Ohio. 6 months ago, my mother sold my late grandmother's ring, the one promised to me since I was 7, to pay for my sister's girl's trip to Cancun. When I asked her why, she dried her hands on a dish towel and said she needed it more. I didn't scream, I didn't make a scene in her kitchen. I spent the next 3 weeks tracking that ring through pawn counters, consignment ledgers, and one very surprised retired school teacher. And what I did when I finally found it made our family group chat, all 23 of them, go silent for 9 full minutes. Then my phone started ringing. 89 times in 1 hour. But here's what none of them knew about those 3 weeks. 11 years of night shifts teach you 2 things. Coffee is a food group and silence has a price. You just don't get the bill right away. I've worked the emergency room at Dayton General for 11 years, mostly overnights, the shift nobody wants and somebody has to take. I bought my own house in 2019, a little brick 2-bedroom with a mailbox that leans left no matter how many times I straighten it. I fix my own faucets. I do my own taxes. And in my family, that self-sufficiency earned me a very specific job title, the one who handles things. When my mother's furnace died 2 Januaries ago, I was the one who paid the deposit at 6 in the morning after a 12-hour shift. When my sister Brianna totaled her Civic, I drove her to work for a month on my days off, both ways. When Grandma Margaret got sick, really sick, I was the one who moved my schedule around chemo calendars, who sat in oncology waiting rooms with cold coffee, who learned what all the numbers on the monitors meant and wished I hadn't. Nobody asked me to do any of it. That's the thing about being the reliable one. Nobody ever has to ask. They just assume and you deliver. And the assuming and the delivering start to look so much like love that you stop checking whether anyone would ever deliver for you. My mother had a phrase for me, and she said it like a compliment every single time. Nora doesn't need anything. She said it at Thanksgiving, at birthdays, at funerals. Nora doesn't need anything. It took me 27 years and 1 empty velvet box to understand what that sentence actually meant. In my family, being reliable is a full-time job, unpaid, and the benefits, it turns out, were being cut the whole time. The ring was a 1958 European cut diamond, 1.2 carat, on a thin gold band worn soft by 60 years of dishwater and garden soil. My grandfather bought it after 2 years of railroad work took him through 4 states. And when he finally came home to Margaret Hartman, he said the ring had travelled further than he had. She told that story every Christmas. I heard it first when I was 7, sitting on her porch steps in a June heat that smelled like cut grass. And that was the night she slid the ring halfway down my little finger and said, "This will be yours one day, Nora. I've already decided." Promise made to a 7-year-old is a small thing to everyone except the 7-year-old. I carried it for 27 years. And here's what matters, it wasn't just a porch promise. When Grandma died 20 months ago, her will said it plainly. The diamond ring to my granddaughter, Nora Campbell. Black ink, notarized, filed. My mother was named executor, and the ring went into the cedar chest in her sewing room for safekeeping, along with Grandma's cardigans, her Bible, and the recipe box. I asked twice to take it home. Both times my mother patted my arm and said the same thing. "It's safer here, honey, you work nights. Houses like yours get broken into." I remember standing in her kitchen thinking that's not really a reason. I remember deciding not to push because pushing in our family was a thing only selfish people did. So the ring stayed in the cedar chest, or at least that's where all of us believed it was. Right up until the Sunday dinner when my sister started talking about white sand beaches, and something in my mother's face moved a half-inch too fast. Sunday dinners at my mother's house run on a script: pot roast, canned green beans, my mother refusing help and then complaining nobody helps. That particular Sunday, Brianna arrived glowing, phone in hand, thumbing through pictures of an all-inclusive resort in Cancun. Swim-up bar, ocean view rooms, 6 girls from her bartending job, 5 nights, leaving Thursday. Brianna is 29 and she can make a Tuesday sound like a festival. And honestly, I love that about her. The same way you love a golden retriever that has never once considered where the food comes from. I asked the obvious question, keeping it light, passing the rolls. 5 nights inclusive, did they make you Employee of the Year? Brianna laughed, my mother did not. My mother stood up and started clearing plates that still had food on them. "It's paid for," Brianna said, breezy as ever. "Mom helped me out. I've had such a hard year with the breakup and everything." A hard year? Brianna's hard year involved a boyfriend who moved to Columbus and a leash she broke on purpose. My hard year involved holding a stranger's hand while he died at 4 in the morning because his family couldn't get there in time. But I didn't say that. I said, that was generous of Mom. And I watched my mother's back at the sink, the set of her shoulders, the way she rinsed the same plate 3 times. Night shift nursing gives you a radar for the moment before a monitor alarm goes off. A stillness the body makes right before it tells the truth. My mother's shoulders had that stillness. Nobody at the table noticed but me. After dinner, I went upstairs to my old bedroom, which my mother has turned into a sewing room, the way some people turn grief into wallpaper. I wasn't snooping. Grandma's birthday was coming up that week, and I wanted her cufflink box. Grandpa's cufflinks, the ones she kept, because I'd promised my cousin Daniel a photo of them for a scrapbook page. The cedar chest opens with a sound like a small door to a smaller world. Cardigans, the Bible with the cracked spine, and the ring box, dark blue velvet, sitting exactly where it always sat. I don't know why I opened it. I'd like to say instinct, but the truth is simpler. I wanted to see it. I wanted 30 seconds with the one thing in that house that was mine. The box was empty, not askew, not misplaced. Empty, with the little satin slot pressed flat like a bed nobody slept in. I carried it downstairs the way you carry a bad X-ray to an attending. My mother was at the sink again. "Mom," I said, "where's Grandma's ring?" And my mother, I want you to hear this part exactly the way it happened. My mother did not flinch, did not stall, did not reach for a single softening word. She dried her hands on the dish towel, folded it in thirds and said, "I sold it, honey. Brianna needed it more." 4 decades of Sunday dinners in that kitchen, and it had never once been that quiet. Somewhere behind me the refrigerator hummed. My mother picked the towel back up, turned to the dishes, and started washing as if she'd just told me it might rain Tuesday. I stood there holding an empty velvet box, and I understood with a clarity that felt almost medical that the trip to Cancun had already been paid in full. I set the box on the counter between us like evidence, because that's what it was. That ring was left to me in the will. You were the executor, Mom. You signed the paperwork. She sighed the sighs she reserves for difficult children. It was sitting in a box, Nora, doing nothing. Your sister was falling apart. You have your house, your career, your savings. You have never once needed a thing. There it was again. My job title read aloud at my own demotion. She kept going, and I'll give her this. She had the whole doctrine ready like she'd rehearsed it, or worse, like she'd never needed to rehearse it because she'd believed it her entire life. Family things belong to the family. A ring in a drawer helps no one. Brianna was crying every night. Did I want my sister crying every night? And then, with actual pride, the detail that stopped my breath. I got a good price for it too, $2,900. The trip was $2,600. She said the numbers the way she'd announced a coupon. $2,900 for a ring appraised at more than double that, but I didn't know that part yet. What I knew was my phone buzzing at that exact moment, a text from Brianna already boarding gate happy. A photo of a frozen margarita the size of a fishbowl. Caption, "First one's for you, sis, work is for suckers." She didn't know, or she decided not to know, which in my family is a form of knowing with better lighting. "You felt resourceful," I said. She smiled, relieved. "Exactly, honey." That was the moment I stopped arguing. Arguing is for people who think they're in a misunderstanding. Monday, after my shift, I drove the 20 minutes back to my mother's house and asked for one thing, the name of the shop. She was doing a crossword at the kitchen table and didn't look up. I don't remember, Nora. A convenient memory from a woman who balanced a register drawer to the penny for 30 years. I asked again, gently, the way I'd ask a patient where the pain was. She set down her pen. "What are you going to do? Buy it back, make some scene? It's done, honey, don't turn this into a whole production." I kept my voice level. "It wasn't yours to sell, Mom, that's all. I want to know where it went." And then she said the thing that changed the shape of my whole search. She waved her hand, dismissive, half back in her crossword already, and said, "Oh, for heaven's sake, it's what you do for family. I've done it before." I stood very still. "You've done what before?" Her mouth closed like a drawer. The pen went back to moving. "It's a saying," she said, "but it wasn't. And both of us knew it wasn't because my mother does not deal in sayings. She deals in policy, and policy comes from precedent." I texted Brianna that night on her second day in Cancun because whatever else my sister is, she is not my mother, and I wanted to believe the difference mattered. I kept it plain. "Mom sold Grandma's ring to pay for your trip, the ring that was left to me. Did you know?" The typing bubble appeared and disappeared for a long time, which told me more than the answer did. Then, "OMG, Nora, I didn't know it was your ring specifically. Mom said she was selling some old stuff of Grandma's that nobody was using. I swear I'll pay you back every cent. I promise. Read that again with me because I've read it maybe 200 times. She didn't know it was my ring specifically, meaning she knew a ring was sold, meaning she knew Grandma's things were being turned into resort credit. And the question she chose not to ask was which things and whose. In my family we have a specialty, and it isn't cruelty. Cruelty takes effort. Our specialty is not asking. Not asking is free and the exchange rate is fantastic. I did the math that night at my kitchen table because numbers are honest even when families aren't. Ring sold for $2,900. Trip cost $2,600, which left $300 unaccounted for. And I am embarrassed by how long I stared at that gap. As if finding the $300 would explain the $2,600. I found it 2 weeks later by accident. A juicer. My mother had bought herself a $300 cold-press juicer, the kind influencers use, still in its box on her counter, because apparently my grandmother's diamond covered the trip with a little leftover for wellness. Brianna never mentioned paying me back again. The margaritas, I assume, were excellent. I stopped texting and started making a list of every pawn and consignment shop within 30 miles. The list had 22 shops on it. I work 3/12s a week, so I had 4 days, and I treated it like triage. Closest first, estate specialists prioritized, cash for gold kiosks last, because melting that ring down was a thought I could not afford to have before a shift. I called 11 shops the first week on my breaks, standing in the ambulance bay with my thumb in one ear. I described it the same way every time, like reading vitals. European cut diamond, 1.2 carat gold band, ladies size 6, likely brought in by a woman in her early 60s, probably 3 to 5 weeks ago. 10 no's. Some kind, some bored. One man who tried to sell me a different ring entirely, which honestly deserves points for effort. It was the 12th call, a place called Hadley's Estate Jewelry over on Far Hills Avenue, where the pause happened. You learn pauses in my job. There's the pause of someone checking and there's the pause of someone deciding, and they do not sound the same. This was a deciding pause. The man on the line, older voice, careful, said, "We handle a lot of estate pieces, ma'am." I couldn't say over the phone. I said I understood. He said, and I could hear him choosing the words like steps on ice, "You'd have to come in." I hung up, looked at my reflection in the ambulance bay doors, and told the woman there, "We found it." Hadley's Estate Jewelry smells like lemon polish and old velvet, and the man behind the counter matched his shop. Early 60s, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of careful that comes from 40 years of other people's heirlooms. Thomas Hadley. I gave him the description again in person this time, and I put my grandmother's funeral card on the counter, which was not a strategy. Or maybe it was. In the ER, we call it establishing context. He looked at the card longer than he needed to. Then he went into the back and came out with a ledger, an actual ledger, leather-ruled, and turned it toward me, one finger holding his place like a hymn. Consignment intake 5 weeks prior. Ladies' diamond ring, European cut, approximately 1.2 carat, yellow gold band, size 6. Seller, Diane Campbell. And there it was, my mother's signature, the same handwriting that signed my grade school permission slips, signing away the one thing my grandmother had put my name on. I had imagined that moment for 2 weeks, and I want to be honest with you about what it felt like because it wasn't rage. It was the feeling you get when the X-ray confirms the fracture you already diagnosed by touch. It felt like being right, which is a much lonelier feeling than people think. "Is it here?" I asked. Thomas Hadley took off his glasses, and I knew before he said it, the way you know from a surgeon's walk. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, that piece sold Tuesday of last week." The floor did not open. Floors never do. I asked the only question left. Sold to whom? And Thomas Hadley, decent man, terrible messenger, folded his glasses and gave me the sentence that would run my next 2 weeks. "That I can't disclose, not without paperwork. I suspect you don't want to file." I drove home from Hadley's with a plan that had exactly one step. Find a photograph of the ring. Proof it existed. Proof it was hers. Proof of what it was worth. I pulled the albums off my shelf and found Christmas 1997, Grandma's hand on a turkey platter, the diamond catching the flash. Good, but not enough. And then I remembered the recipe box. I want you to understand I was looking for a photo she used to keep tucked in there of her and Grandpa at the lake. What I found instead was filed behind the dessert section, between harvest apple pie and no-fail fudge, flat and yellowed and folded once. An appraisal card from Kettering Fine Jewelers, dated 1996. Ladies' diamond ring, European cut, 1.21 carat, 14 carat yellow gold band. Full description, measurements. A little hand-drawn diagram of the stone with its inclusions marked like a tiny star map. Appraised value, $6,500. Owner, Margaret Hartman. I sat down on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets and held that card for a long time. Two things arrived at once, the way bad news and good news sometimes carpool. The first was arithmetic. $6,500 appraised almost 30 years ago, sold by my mother for $2,900 to fund 5 nights at a swim-up bar. The second was bigger, and it rearranged something in my chest. My grandmother, who trusted my mother with her checkbook, her medications, her whole dying, had quietly moved the proof of my inheritance out of my mother's house and into mine. Hidden in the one object she made sure went directly into my hands. Cold hands make good crust, Nora. She knew, maybe not the whole shape of it, but she knew her daughter, and she had left me a map. I went back to Hadley's the next morning with a folder, the will flagged at the bequest, my grandmother's full legal sentence leaving the ring to Nora Campbell, the 1997 photo, and the appraisal card. Thomas Hadley read all of it. He read it twice, actually. And somewhere in the second pass, he stopped being a shopkeeper and started being a grandfather. I watched the transfer happen around his eyes. "This is solid documentation," he said. "This is the best documentation I've seen walk in here in years." Then he laid it back down and built the wall brick by brick because he had to. The shop bought the piece in good faith with signed paperwork from the seller. The buyer purchased it in good faith from the shop. Ohio law requires him to keep records of both, and the same law forbids him from handing a buyer's name to anyone who walks in with a story, even a story with exhibits. "The record opens," he said, "when there is a police report number attached to it. That's the key that turns the lock. Without it, my hands are tied. With it," he tapped the ledger, "with it, this becomes recovery of stolen property and everything moves." Stolen property. He said it evenly, professionally, and the words still landed somewhere under my ribs. Because there was only one name on the intake line, and it was my mother's. I sat in my car outside the Kettering police station for 40 minutes that afternoon. I watched 2 officers carry coffee inside. I watched a man walk out with a folder and sit in his truck and not start it. I rehearsed the sentence in my head. I'd like to report a theft. And every time I got to the part where they'd ask who took the item, the sentence died in my throat like a stalled engine. My phone rang. Mom. Thomas Hadley's shop had called her that morning to verify the consignment signature, which is procedure. And procedure, I was learning, moves faster than courage. "You went to the shop." Her voice had a pitch I knew from childhood, the one that came out when a cashier shortchanged her, the voice of a woman wronged. "Nora, this stops now. You are embarrassing me in front of business people. Family does not do this to family." I sat there, key in the ignition of a car. I couldn't make myself leave. Listening to the woman who had sold my dead grandmother's bequest explain to me what family does not do to family. I said, "Okay, Mom," which was not agreement, though I let her hear it as agreement, and she softened instantly. Told me Brianna was back and tan and asking about Sunday dinner. Told me she was making the pot roast, as if the empty box on her counter had healed over like a pierced ear. I drove home. I did not file anything. That night I worked a 12-hour shift, and at 4 in the morning we lost a patient. 80 years old, kind eyes. Nobody got there in time. I stood in the supply room afterward and something in me went very, very quiet. Not the giving up kind of quiet, the other kind. 2 nights later I had a patient, 78, pneumonia, scared in the way people get scared at 3 in the morning when the building is quiet enough to hear your own lungs. Her daughter was driving in from Indianapolis. While we waited, she held my hand. Patients do that with night nurses. We're the closest thing to family the hour offers. And she talked to keep the fear busy. She told me about her 3 kids. The oldest ran her errands, managed her pills, fought the insurance company every winter. "She handles everything," the woman said, and then her face did something complicated. "You know, I don't believe I've ever thanked her. Not once properly. You just stop seeing the ones who never make you worry." I drove home at dawn with her sentence riding in the passenger seat. You stop seeing the ones who never make you worry. I'd spent 3 weeks thinking my mother was the whole story. 1 woman, 1 doctrine, 1 dish towel folded in thirds. Sitting at a red light on Wilmington Pike, I finally let myself see the bigger machine. A family, a whole culture of families where being no trouble is a slow way of disappearing, and where the loudest need in the room holds the deed to everything. My grandmother saw it. Quiet isn't the same as gone. I was starting to understand she hadn't been describing me, she'd been warning me. I asked my mother to meet me at the Bob Evans on Stroop Road, neutral ground, booths like Switzerland. I came with one offer and I made it before the coffee cooled. Here's what I'm asking, Mom. You call Thomas Hadley. You pay the shop back what they're out. They recover the ring from the buyer and it comes back quietly. You take the loss and I will never mention any of this again. Not to you, not to the family. It ends as a mistake. That was the whole thing. No apology demanded, no confession in the group chat. A door out held open at cost. My mother stirred her coffee for a long time, and then she looked up and I watched her weigh it. Not the money but the admission underneath the money. Because paying it back meant the sale had been wrong. And if this sale was wrong, then a lifetime of redistribution needed re-examining. And she was 61 years old and not in the market for that. I'm not going to be lectured by my own child, she said. It was a ring, Nora. Your sister needed help and you would let her drown to keep a rock in a drawer. You'd humiliate your mother over a rock. She put $3 on the table for the coffee, which she then did not touch, and she left. I sat in that booth and finished mine. The door I'd held open swung shut so gently it barely made a sound. The ultimatum arrived 2 days later, and true to form, my mother didn't deliver it herself. Aunt Carol called me on my way into a shift, her voice arranged in its concerned setting. Nora, your mom is beside herself. She wants you to know, and honey, I agree with her, that if you go to the police over a family matter, then don't bother coming for Thanksgiving or Christmas. She says if you choose strangers in uniforms over your own mother, then you've chosen. Her words. I stood in the hospital parking garage, badge in hand, and noted the architecture of it. My mother had taken the one decision that was mine and turned it into a trap door under my feet. File and lose the family. Don't file and lose myself. I looked at that side of the ledger honestly for the first time. Nothing they hadn't already taken. That was the discovery. The middle ground I'd been standing on all my life. The good daughter acre where you keep everyone comfortable and get seen someday as payment, had never been land at all. Are you hearing me, honey? Carol asked. I hear you, I said, and that time it was an agreement and I didn't dress it as anything. Monday morning before my shift, I walked into the Kettering police station with my folder. The officer at the desk was named Reyes, mid-40s, reading glasses, the unhurried manner of a man who has taken every kind of report there is. I told it plainly, dates in order like giving handoff at 7:00 a.m. He looked at the will. He looked at the appraisal card and its little star map. He said, this is more documentation than I usually see, which from a cop is practically a bouquet. Then we reached the line on the form, name of person suspected. Reyes held the pen out and did not fill it in for me. Maybe he legally couldn't. Maybe he was being kind. Maybe there's no difference. I thought about the porch when I was 7. I thought about cold hands and good crust. Quiet isn't the same as gone, Nora. My grandmother had moved her evidence into my keeping like a woman sliding a key under a door, and all that was left was for the quiet one to stop confusing quiet with gone. I took the pen, and I wrote in block letters, Diane Campbell, and I signed my name underneath it, and the old life ended right there between 2 lines on a municipal form. I opened the family group chat. I attached 3 photographs, the consignment ledger with her signature, the page of Grandma's will with my name in it and my hand, her hand's hand, the same knuckles wearing the ring. Caption 1 line, it was never yours to give, it's home now. And I pressed send, and I set the phone face down on the counter, and I stood in my little house that I bought myself and I let the old life finish ending. For 9 full minutes, nothing. I know it was 9 because the phone lay there face down and I watched the clock on the stove instead. Kettle on, tea bag in the mug, hands steady the way they're steady in a code. The shake comes after, always after. When I finally turned the phone over, the chat showed 23 people and not one message, just the little line under my photographs, seen by everyone. Somewhere across town, aunts were holding phones, uncles were reading a ledger line twice. A widowed neighbor was deciding this was the best thing that had happened to her since 2020. 9 minutes of the loudest quiet my family ever produced. And then the dam gave. The first call was my mother. I let it ring out. Then Aunt Carol, then my mother, then Brianna, then Carol, then a cousin I hadn't spoken to since a graduation party. Then numbers I didn't have saved. The family tree shaking itself branch by branch onto my kitchen floor. I sat down on that floor with my back against the cabinets, right where I'd once sat holding an appraisal card, and I drank my tea and watched the screen light, ring, die, light again. 89 calls in 1 hour. I counted because counting is free, and I no longer owed anyone my picking up. Toward the end of it, my mother left a voicemail, and I listened to it once that night and never again, though I could recite it to you now. No apology. No mention of Grandma or the will or the word ring at all. Just her voice shaking with a grief I believe was entirely real, saying, "How could you do this to me? To me, Nora." And that was the whole confession, wasn't it? 50 years of doctrine in one pronoun. I sat on my kitchen floor and answered her out loud to nobody, to the stove and the leaning mailbox and the house that had never once asked me to be smaller. "You were right, Mom. Somebody did need it more. You just never once considered it could be me." The phone rang on for a while like weather passing. I washed my mug. I went to bed. And for the first time in 27 years, the quiet in my house belonged entirely to me. The aftermath sorted everyone into exactly who they were. Brianna sent a long message the next morning, and I'll be fair to her. The first half was a real apology, the realest she's ever managed. I should have asked whose ring it was. I didn't want to know. That's on me. The second half was a payment plan, $200 a month until her share of the trip was paid back to me. She made 3 payments, and then December happened, and then her car happened, and the payments stopped. And I want you to know I expected that, and I wrote it down anyway, not to punish her, because the whole lesson of this story is that our family kept no records, and the people with no records get to rewrite everything, and I don't live in that country anymore. Daniel and 2 of my aunts quietly hearted the photographs, 3 small red hearts that cost them something at Thanksgiving, and I knew it and they knew it, and I have never valued any likes more. Aunt Carol posted one long message about how some people choose objects over family, which I did not answer because Aunt Carol was not wrong about someone in that chat choosing objects over family. She just had the wrong name. And then I called Officer Reyes and I declined to press charges. I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't mercy exactly, and it wasn't weakness either. Prosecution would have meant my mother in a courtroom for a doctrine she was raised in, and a sentence wouldn't teach her what the certified letter from Hadley's had already taught the whole family, that the paper speaks now, that the era of quiet redistribution was over, audited on file. Justice was never the point, I told Reyes, and he made a sound like he'd heard that before from people who meant it and people who didn't. The record stays. Closed, property recovered, suspect named, a little municipal number in a drawer downtown saying what my family could never say out loud. It happened, she did it, it was mine. 6 weeks later was Thanksgiving. I wasn't at my mother's table, not because anyone barred the door. The ultimatum had quietly expired once the family read that ledger, the way ultimatums do when the ground shifts under them. I chose the night shift instead, the way I'd chosen it every year the schedule needed somebody. Except this year I brought 2 pies to the break room, crusts rolled cold the way Grandma taught me. And a travel nurse from Tennessee said it was the best pie she'd ever eaten in a hospital, which I told her was the lowest bar in America, and we laughed until report. My mother sent a card in December. Careful cursive, a cardinal on the front, no sorry anywhere in it. I checked the way you check a lab result, just one line under the printed greeting. Families forgive Nora. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. I put it in the recipe box filed behind Harvest apple pie right next to the appraisal card, the proof and the doctrine in the same tin where I can see both. That's the whole inheritance now, and I keep it in order. Mary Ann Doyle and I have coffee once a month in Centerville. She tells 4th grade stories. I bring her honey from the farmer's market. Her husband Frank calls me the paperwork kid with real affection. It's a strange arithmetic, a stranger returned to me at cost what my own mother took at a profit. And I've decided not to soften that sentence because some sentences are true at full strength or not at all. And one evening in January, Brianna showed up on my porch with gas station cocoa and sat on the cold steps beside me and was quiet for a long time, which for Brianna is an event. Then she said, "What was it like being the one who handled everything?" And I looked at my little sister, tan long faded, payment plan defaulted, genuinely asking. "Expensive," I said. She nodded slowly, like a student who's finally been shown her own bill. "We're not fixed, Brianna and I, but there's a door there now, and it was worth the cold to sit beside it a while. As for the ring, I wear it every day, including shifts. Some of the older patients notice it, the ones who know cuts. Good stone, they say. Yes, I tell them, it's been in my family a long time. My grandmother was right. In the end, quiet isn't the same as gone. It just means that when the quiet one finally speaks, she only has to say it once.